Is the noose beginning to close around former President Jacob Zuma, or is Umsholozi just warming up? And why are South Africa's labour relations soaked in blood? The Politbureau is now in session. I'm Nicolaas Bauer, connecting the dots for you on this Sunday, the final show of the year. In the Politbureau today, first up, after this week's devastating High Court's cost ruling against him, Jacob Zuma's battle to remain relevant just got a whole lot harder. With the former president having to foot his own legal bill, questions are being asked exactly how he will bankroll this and where this latest judgment leaves him legally.
The decisions taken by the presidency and the state attorney that the state would cover the legal costs of Mr. Zuma incurred in his personal capacity in the criminal prosecution instituted against him on or about 20th June 2005, 28 December 2007, and 16 March 2018 are declared invalid and are reviewable and set aside.
Well, to discuss this further, I'm joined in studio on the Politbureau by Professor Kwandiwe Kondlo. He's a professor in the Department of Politics and International Relations, teaching political economy at my alma mater, the University of Johannesburg, and visiting associate professor at the Wits University and advocate of the High Court of South Africa, James Grant. Thank you for joining us on this Sunday, the final Politbureau of the year. Let me start out with you, Advocate Grant. Where does this leave Jacob Zuma legally? We know that this has been a ding-dong battle that's been going on for more than a decade, but does this High Court ruling actually leave him floundering legally?
No, because there's still two courts to go, and if, and I expect when, he notes an appeal against this judgment, that appeal will have the effect of suspending the effect of this current order, so that until he gets to the Supreme Court of Appeal and they either confirm it or overturn it, he has to do nothing once he's noted his appeal, and he still has 10 to 14 days to do so. And so in that sense, I thoroughly expect that if he follows through with his approach, he will appeal this. And then also let me say that it's not inconceivable that under the State Attorneys Act, a new decision could be made to fund him.
Based on the outcome of the Supreme Court of Appeal, should his appeal reach that point?
Well, if a proper application was to be put before the State Attorney's Office, there is a provision in the State Attorneys Act which provides that even if the state or a department is not a party, but it has an interest, as is to be determined by the state attorney, then the state can fund. So if he was to launch a new application, it's entirely possible that a new state attorney could say, do you know what, South Africa's entire reputation is on the line here. We need this man to be properly represented in court. And he could find support that way.
So let's talk about it from a political point of view. Professor Kondlo, this is not unlike Jacob Zuma in the past decade and a half. He's always played the legal game to a T, drawing out legal proceedings as far and as long as needs be. Do you think that that's his only option at this point? It's a pretty damning judgment. Yes, he's still got two options to take it to the Supreme Court of Appeal and then the Constitutional Court. But politically speaking, what does that say if he does?
Yes, you're absolutely correct. Mr. Zuma still has a lot of political options, in the sense that, as we all know, throughout his life, his shield has always been the ANC, despite the many cracks that you find in the ANC. In fact, the cracks are an advantage in the sense that that's where he finds places to hide. So politically, I think Mr. Zuma still has a lot to draw from the patronage networks that he invested in during the 9 years when he was ANC president and the president of the country.
So are you suggesting that these patronage networks that he set up while he was in office will possibly start coming to fruition from a financial point of view now if he needs bankrolling for his legal challenges?
think from a financial point of view, I'm not inclined to believe that some of these patronage networks have really dried out. Even though the question one may ask is, what do they have to gain by investing and supporting Mr. Zuma? The answers could be varied, but in ANC circles, you do get that impression that some of them actually see the Ramaphosa phase as a passing one.
Okay.
That the ANC is still going to be recaptured, reconquered, and the path towards radical economic transformation.
Their version of it.
Their version of it will continue. You see, it's one set of stories you get when you talk to ANC members at branch level, especially those who supported Nkosazana Zuma in the run-up to Nasrec.
So, Professor Kondo, we're going to leave the political aspect for a moment. Advocate Grant, timeline point of view, I mean, like I said, Jacob Zuma is adept at playing the victim and also drawing out legal proceedings while he continues the persona of someone that's being handled wrongly by the law. How long are we talking? I mean, the Supreme Court of Appeal, first of all, needs to decide whether or not they're going to hear the matter, but we could still be tying ourselves up in knots even after the 2019 general election.
Absolutely beyond that. It would take probably at least a year to get before the Supreme Court of Appeal if they're going to hear it, and then to the Constitutional Court after that at least another year. So for at least the next 2 years, this entire matter could be suspended.
And then, should the Supreme Court of Appeal rule out of his favour, I mean, what are the prospects from a constitutional point of view of actually taking this up? I mean, Jacob Zuma has, in all honesty, created a lot of good case law for academics and constitutional court lawyers during his time in office, and it seems as though he may well do the same out of office.
I'm not sure that it's good case law. He's made a lot of case law. I don't know if it's changed the law in any real respects. If one were to, for instance, read the State Attorneys Act, there was never any massive principle to be decided here. It's just going to turn on the facts, and in this particular case, it's going to depend on whether the Constitutional Court thinks that there's anything interesting at all here.
So, coming back to the political point of view, I mean, it was never to be expected that Jacob Zuma would roll over and die. We saw this week now, in the wake of that damning court judgment, he's now even taken to Twitter. I mean, there's a various couple of idioms and statements that come out. When days are dark, friends are few. But it would seem for Jacob Zuma, he still has many friends in many places.
Yes, don't forget that Mr. Zuma, in all his actions, he's the kind of guy who, in many instances, is intelligence-driven. And we must not take it for granted that actually some of the intelligence operatives, even in this administration, some of them are actually still very sympathetic and very supportive of Mr. Zuma.
Even if there is this cleanup going, this review of our intelligence structures that's been put forward by President Cyril Ramaphosa?
Absolutely. Even though there's still a review going on, some of them are still very sympathetic and very loyal to him. But at the same time, we must not forget that one thing which plays to Mr. Zuma's political advantage is what happened at Nasrec. Mr. Ramaphosa didn't win outrightly at Nasrec. It was with a small margin, which actually means that within the NEC, within his cabinet, and within the regions, within the provinces at branch level, Mr. Zuma still commands a lot of sympathy and even support for that matter.
Advocate, how is this going to be affected with the new person in the MPA hot seat? We've got Shamila Batohi taking her office early next year. I mean, would it be reasonable to expect the new NDPP to take a fresh view to these long-standing cases that the MPA has against Jacob Zuma?
I think it's now out of her hands by virtue of the fact that there is a stay of prosecution before a court. And that really means that they've reached the end of the road with her. In fact, her office is defunct by virtue of the fact that Sean Abrams made that final decision. And there's no question to my mind that I've heard of that there's any any attempt to override or overrule that. Their approach is the approach that they're making, which is a stay of prosecution, and that'll be for a judge to decide. Of course, if that single judge declines that, who knows where it could go from there. But the issue of who's going to be funding that, of course, will determine quite a lot, I suppose.
Professor, final word from you, and please do keep it brief. And this is all getting very complicated when there's an election right around the corner and the ANC needs Jacob Zuma to mobilize in KwaZulu-Natal.
They need Jacob Zuma to attract the numbers, but at the same time it destroys their case as a party which is seeking to realize a new dawn, clean the state, reposition the ANC. So the ANC is in a very difficult position.
In many ways, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
The more they stay the same.
Gentlemen, have a blessed festive season coming up. Why can't South Africans strike without killing each other? Industrial relations soaked in blood, coming up next on the Politbureau.